Hello, everyone. We can see you slowly coming into the Zoom session for this evening, our Eventide conversation number 3, adapting to engage young audiences. All right, what lovely photographs we have up there on the Zoom slide to welcome everyone tonight. So welcome everyone. As I said, we're here for the 3rd in the series of the Eventide conversation, adapting to engage young audiences. Now, Eventide is a series of conversations facilitated by both APAM and the Hong Kong Arts Administrators Association. And I do thank our colleagues, Independent Director and Producer 𝐂𝐯𝐞𝐬 and Executive Director of the Hong Kong Ballet, Heidi Lee, for the curation of tonight's talk. And of course, the program supporter, the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations. So my name is Tamara Harrison, and I am Head of Children's, Families and Creative Learning Programs at Sydney Opera House, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you tonight. So for my visual description, I am a middle-aged female. I have grey-black hair with black glasses, and I have on a blue dress with white and black flowers and birds, and I'm sitting in my study with a drawing of the Sydney Opera House in the background. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from where I work and live, who are the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. At the Sydney Opera House, we work at a place called by First Nations people 𝐄𝐯𝐿, and that's a place where for hundreds and thousands of years, people have gathered and sung and danced and told stories. And it's such a great privilege to be inspired by this on a daily basis. So I therefore pay my respects to all First Nations people joining us tonight and their elders past, present and emerging. Now, tonight our conversation is between these two wonderful women who work in our sector. Ms. Lynn Yao. Lynn is the Chief Executive Officer of the absolutely fabulous Theatre Connection. And they are an internationally awarded arts and education company for young people who put creativity at the heart of learning, working across both projects in Hong Kong and abroad. And under Lynn's leadership, AFTEC has pioneered a learning pedagogy that really focuses on a meaningful engagement and impact for students, and as well as having done many cross-sector collaborations, including work with groups such as young medical students. And we also welcome tonight for our conversation Ms. Sasha Zahra, and Sasha is the recently appointed Associate Director for Windmill Theatre Company, one of Australia's most respected theatre companies, making original theatre for young audiences and taking it to the world. Sasha brings extensive directing, producing, curating and programming experience to her new role from not only the children's arts sector, but with First Nations and international projects and festivals. So before we begin the conversation, a little bit of housekeeping. Our conversation will go for about 40 to 50 minutes now, and then we'll have time for some questions and answers at the end of the session for about 15 minutes. So I encourage you to make note of your questions to share towards the end of the session. And we have the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom screen there that you can record some of your questions towards the end of the session. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Lynn and Sasha, who will begin by introducing us to their work with 4 to 5 key slides as a conversation starter. So maybe let's start first with you, Lynn. Please, can you tell us more about the absolutely fabulous Theatre Connection?
Thank you. Don't you love that adjective? You always have to say we're absolutely fabulous. Before I do that, if I may give a visual description of myself. So like Tamara, I'm middle-aged. I have short hair with earrings, and I also wear black rimmed glasses. Today, I am in a dark gray sleeveless dress with a little white jacket because the air conditioning in Hong Kong is always freezing. I'm now in my office, small though it may be. It is a lovely, cozy and safe place. And my virtual background actually is a visual of a theatre production about a British explorer, a real person, alive still. And the show will be on in 2 weeks. So thank you very much, Hong Kong AAA and APAM, for having AFTEC and myself here today. Eventide is a word that I haven't heard for ages. And it's lovely to be reacquainted with it. So I'm delighted to be sharing views on adapting to engage young audiences. In these 5 minutes, I hope I can give a very brief snapshot of what we do, because in Hong Kong, AFTEC is somewhat of an anomaly. We're bilingual. We work both in Chinese and in English. That's not the strange bit. The strange bit is theatre is a means to our education end, and most theatres in Hong Kong are producing companies. When we first started life in late 2008, we were very much captivated by a comment from the Master Report in the UK. They were focusing on supporting excellence in the arts in the UK. But there was one sentence that referred to, in the UK at that time, Brian McMaster thought there was too much superficial ongoings with the arts, and how they should, in fact, look at the impact that the arts can make. So the word impact has stuck ever since, and this is basically what we look for. The acronym to AFTEC, in fact, also stands for Arts for Transformative Educational Change. This is because in the last 12 years, we really delved into the role of the arts in education or creative learning and teaching. We feel that the arts have a lot more to offer in education as well. And this is why we're an anomaly, because we tap into this. We've been exploring, experimenting, failing, trying again. We mainly work with educational institutions. So that would be from primary school to secondary and university as well. We also train the trainers. And although we do have 8 weeks in a proscenium arch theatre, which is government owned and government run, most of the time we're engaged with teachers and students. Melanie, if we could have the first slide, please. Thank you. So this is one of our ongoing programs, or young theatre makers, evidently, because we target young people. And while this may look quite static to you, it actually explains this program and generally what we do. So we have 2 generations of young people there. On the right of the screen, you will have 2 graduates from our Bravo program, which I will talk about later. And sitting down on our stage, young people from colleges and schools. Now, what we have them engaged in here basically is analyzing the text, only performing extracts of the play, because to us, understanding viewpoints, meaning, and character is the focus of the arts in education. Thank you, Tamara. What we aim for, what we have been aiming for, is to give agency to young people. That means the ability to stand on their feet, both cognitively and effectively. I think we must remember that many of us in Hong Kong live in very small, compact flats, if not nano flats, the size of a car park. You may or may not believe this. And therefore, it is so important that as a learning theatre, we inspire, we motivate, and we help transform lives. Not in a large way, but in whatever small way, this also helps. We focus very much on creativity, critical thinking, communication and collaboration, the 4 C's, which I'm sure all of you know very well. And we, as a learning theatre, we'd like to give them, we like to empower them. Can I have the next slide, please, Tamara? Melanie, thank you. So never mind all those colors. So this is a scheme for young people between 13 and 19 who's very serious about acting. It's 1.5 years. That's another aspect of what we do. We tend to like to do longer term projects. And these are some of the 20 performance indicators that we actually tried longitudinally to measure them. Basically, you need to look at the pre-survey, which is blue, and then the yellow one. And I believe this is definitely the first time we've tried to measure the impact of the arts, because the arts are not given due attention, I think. And so if we are able to show sponsors or policymakers that the arts actually do a lot more than simply entertain, this is what we work towards. So we talk about self-esteem and self-confidence. Actually, what is it? And the tool to what we do in all our work, from primary to tertiary and training the trainers as well, is through reflections. If I have time, we can discuss it later. We train the trainers so that they can cascade the effects of the arts, empowering young people and agency, because as one single small institution, what we can do is really very limited. Another thing that we put great store by is cross-disciplinarity. If I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. The arts are often thought to be for people who are converted. Now, we really don't believe this here. The arts and culture, of course, have profound values. This is what we'd like to tap into, not just the imagination and expression, but also viewpoints, different levels of understanding, multiple angles of seeing things, and the meaningfulness, I think, of being human. So this is I believe this would be year 1 medical students, and they have to take a compulsory workshop in either drama or music. So this was from, about 2 years ago. We've also just finished a project with social workers. So this is by way of saying that we try and open up different minds. Our main aim being to offer a creative habit of mind for people across different spectrums, arts and non-art as well. So in this small way, we hope to contribute to breaking this glass ceiling of the division, the gap, the chasm between sciences and the arts. We can talk further, definitely, about COVID and its effect, but the next slide, thank you, is just a teaser to what we have been working on for the last year and which would be launched next year. The proverbial online program, which we will be calling DGF Tech. Now, in Chinese, the word crisis is comprised of 2 words. The first one meaning danger in Chinese, and the second one meaning opportunity. And I think all of us in the arts are some of the bravest people, because in the face of crisis, we really have to not only be resilient, but to rise and take the challenges. As a result of going digital soon, very soon, I think we have a lot more opportunities internationally. So in the as a sum up, I would like to say that we hope to be able to impact lives positively. Young people, definitely, but also adults. And I think I will just stop here for the moment. Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you, Lynn. That's a fantastic introduction to the company. Sasha, would you like to share some information about Windmill Theatre Company?
Sure. First, I'll just give a visual description as well. I'm a female. I have brown curly hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing large hoop earrings. My hair is in a bun. I'm wearing a black sort of V-neck jumper, and I'm sitting in the spare room of my house, which is located in the Adelaide Hills, which is on Permarant country. I pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this place, but also to the Kaurna people, which is where Windmill is located. and where the majority of Windmill Theatre Company's work is created, on the Adelaide Plains, which is known as Tarrandanyanga, the place of the red kangaroo. I would also like to acknowledge that there is a long history of storytelling, dance and ceremony on this ancient country, and we are really privileged to be able to continue to tell stories and share stories on this ancient land. Okay, so an overview of Windmill. Melanie, I might just let you, I'll start and maybe you can just slowly, scroll through these as I'm happy to speak over them. But Windmill Theatre Company was established in 2002. It's based in South Australia. And as Tamara said earlier, it's one of Australia's largest producers of theatre for children and families and young people. We bring artists together to uncover and ignite stories that are burning to be told. Each year we perform in our hometown of Adelaide and then traditionally tour our works across Australia and usually across the world. And during the last 19 years, we've created 37 brand new Australian works and toured them to over 240 cities and towns across 30 countries. Windmill's an interesting, it's actually a public authority, which sounds a bit strange, and it's a subsidiary of the minister, and we sit within the education department. And we have 10.6 full-time staff, so we're a relatively small team, but we engage 70 to 80 artists across every year. The usual model of Windmill is that we create a brand new Australian premiere every year, and then we tour it usually nationally first and then in non-COVID times internationally, as well as managing tours of our many diverse works that are within our repertoire. So Windmill makes works of really, really varied scale. We make very small, intimate works that, can be toured into small regional venues. And we also make large scale musicals that are toured into major art centres, presented at festivals and kind of everything in between. That last slide that you just saw is a picture of Windmill Pictures, which is a really interesting new arm to the company that was established in 2016, 2017 in response to the runaway success of Windmill's first feature film, which was presented in 2015. The name of the film was Girl Asleep, and it was based on one of our theatre productions of the same name. And after the success of that film, there was a real desire to establish this arm of the company that kind of housed our digital projects. And as that's developed over the last few years, it sits underneath the Windmill Theatre Company kind of banner, but is a completely separate arm of the company and is funded completely separately from Windmill Theatre. And it's a really kind of interesting convergence model where our live theatre works are now being told in new ways and are informing the way we tell our digital stories, from films to online projects. And we're just about to go into production for our first ever television series, in partnership with ABC Kids and the South Australian Film Corp. So it's a really amazing area that the company is moving into. It's not at all instead of or at the detriment of the theatre company. That is still our focus and where our energy still goes in terms of creating a new work and touring our works. But we are seeing that it's a really lovely way for our sort of unique theatrical, artist-centric process of making work can shift into another area and realise a really different outcome for the company. So we're really excited about the growth of Windmill Pictures, and where that will kind of lead in the future, and how the two arms of the company will begin to sort of feed into each other. I think I touched on this, but I do want to say that at the heart of what Windmill does is engage with artists, and that is really, really important in how we make work. We create work over long periods of time. It takes us a year to a year and a half to develop our new works. And artists, it's a very collaborative process. And the other really important element to Windmill is our education program. And through our education program, we really nurture the creativity of young people and I guess that's done in a number of ways. Obviously, our audiences are school students as well as families and young people. But in addition to every single theatre project that we create, we sort of create innovative learning tools that are connected to that particular project. And they're really different depending on the project. Sometimes they're immersive digital experiences, and sometimes they're about artists going into schools or into education institutions and engaging in really, really practical kind of making-based projects and everything in between. But for us, it's really important that artists get in front of young people and there is a real exchange and a sharing of those skills. So yeah, I guess they're the sort of main areas that the company are working within. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now, and we'll go into more detail soon.
Well, thank you both, because you both described very different business as usual, I suppose. And I suppose the first conversation point I wanted to put to you both was that obviously we're in the not normal now in terms of COVID restrictions, and some of us are coming in and some of us are going out. And the work that we do for young people and children feels as important as ever. So I'm wondering if you could both talk for a bit about how things have changed or shifted for you in the last 18 months. You know, what have you reinvented? What have you adapted? And maybe from programming or projects, maybe about funding, might be if you can go into schools or not go into schools with your education work. I think we'd all be keen to hear about what's the current business as usual for you? What's changed?
Sure.
Everything, I would say. Wouldn't you say so, Sasha?
Yep, everything has changed. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to launch in if you want me to start, Lynn.
Please.
I guess, you know, for my Australian colleagues and friends who are listening, it obviously in Australia, it's been a bit of a different situation depending on where you are, and it's an ever-changing kind of beast that we can all continue to navigate. Windmill being based in Adelaide, I think we've been quite lucky in terms of, you know, the way the pandemic has hit us. Obviously, we've had lockdowns and we've had times where we can't gather, but I guess I'll give a quick overview right now. In South Australia, we are able to gather in theatres, which is quite amazing at 75%. So we have, over the last few months, been able to continue our touring within South Australia and to selected places and spaces, you know, within the country. Obviously, that has changed over the last 18 months. There's been times where we've been able to go into New South Wales and Victoria, times where we haven't. And there have been a couple of borders that have kind of remained open. So I guess one of the interesting things about Windmill and a strength is the diversity of our offerings and the ability for us to pivot to adaptable national touring. So I guess we have many small scale works, medium scale works, as well as large scale works. So at this time we've been as well as digital works, which already existed. And so we've been able to kind of shift our focus a little bit on touring those smaller works into areas that we can go and keep our artists working in that way. And as I said, there has already been a shift to a digital focus within the company. So across this time, our main focus has been on Windmill pictures, but also what we call Windmill at home, which I guess is when the lockdown kind of happened. Our first lockdown happened. Thanks, Melanie. I was just about to cue you, but you're all over it. You can again just scroll through these. Our little byline for Windmill at Home is the show must go online. We were quite happy with that. But I guess two of the main projects aside from Windmill Pictures is a project called Honey, I'm Home, which is this little, some of these characters here that you just see are images of, yeah, thanks, Melanie. We can hang on this one for a sec. When we went into our first lockdown and we couldn't continue our national touring, we were able to keep engaging our audience, our artists, through the creation of a whole lot of really short little online projects. So this is a photo of some of our little creatures that were created by one of our puppet makers, and a little short animation was created. They all exist on our website. There's about 30 of them that were created over that period. So it was a really lovely way for our artists to keep creating while they were at home. And then if we jump to the next one, this project is called Sunrunners, and it was created during lockdown as well. It's an immersive audio adventure, I guess, that we co-produced with Perth-based Audio Play. And yeah, it's a 6-part sci-fi that recreates active nature of live storytelling by creating, essentially young people download an app and then, you know, sort of wear headphones and then are prompted to create a world in their own homes. So at the beginning, they're asked to collect a whole lot of things that they have. I think there's 2 chairs, some pillows, a blanket, and then through a series of instructions that they listen to, they kind of create this world and, you know, battle aliens and, you know, create this whole beautiful theatrical experience in their homes. So I guess for us, some of these projects already existed, so we just shifted to that. That's another image, thanks Melanie, from one of the Honey, I'm Home short videos that was made. So yeah, we were able to, I guess, pivot our focus to some of the projects that were already happening. We were able to look at smaller scale touring within South Australia, and also within areas of Australia that we were able to, you know, we were able to travel to.
And Sasha, can I ask you, because I think a lot of people listening who are practitioners would be interested to know, where are you at now in terms of how you feel about that digital work and how much to lean into that or go back into the theatre spaces that we know in that there was a lot of novelty, I suppose, when we went into COVID, and as you say, a lot of pivoting.
Yeah.
We all felt that we needed to make digital work very quickly and serve our audiences. I just wonder if you have a different sentiment now, or how do you feel about it now this far into it all?
Yeah, look, I think, as I said, a lot of these projects already existed within the Windmill repertoire or were planned, so it was kind of good, you know, good timing, and especially the kind of the building of Windmill Pictures and that shift of focus that we were already building. Certainly having our artists not in lockdown and being able to gather again and, you know, create, we are just, you know, we're very privileged in Adelaide. Again, I must say, we just started a creative development this week on a new work. So look, our focus always will be trying to continue to create new work and engage with artists face to face wherever possible. I don't think we will try and replace what we do with digital work, but obviously it is already a very big part of what Windmill does, particularly in terms of our education resources. Often they are online kind of learning tools, or and so yeah, I think it was a little bit of a shift in priorities and what projects we focused on when, but certainly, yeah, I certainly don't think one will outweigh the other.
Lynn, what about for you? What's happened for you in COVID times?
Well, our first lockdown started last January, late last January. And as you will all know, Hong Kong went through 3 months of SARS in 2003. And when the first COVID lockdown came, I mean, nobody knew whether it was going to be 3 weeks, 3 months or whatever. But after a few weeks, it just didn't sit right. We couldn't simply wait for it to be over. And anyway, that would be a waste of resources. So our artistic director, Vicky Wee, said, she being a Star Trek fan, survival is not enough. And we said, indeed, we just can't simply sit here and hold our breath. So we have a wonderful team of colleagues, 75% of whom are actually 30 years and under. So it's quite a journey. So we had a lot of inter-team research done. Who's doing what all over the world? Where should we be going? So I think I really like the verb in the title of this conversation, because to adapt is really having to be very agile. And since I've been thinking about this conversation, I've realized that the adaptation is not simply programming wise, it's obviously operations wise. So my colleagues had to try to salvage whatever classes that we could manage to get onto Zoom, but that was really very palliative. It was just a band-aid, right? We can't spend the rest of your life salvaging and not getting to many places. And a lot of our young people are actually from vulnerable background, and therefore, good as digital is and will be, some of them didn't have access to Wi-Fi or internet. So bless my colleagues, some of them really sent portable Wi-Fi connectors to them as well. But when I looked at adapting, I've realized that in these last 18 months, my young colleagues have been fantastic because they brought their digital savoir-faire and know-how into work. And I've been learning a lot from them. Clumsily, of course, I cannot ever handle what they can handle, but conceptually, I think I learned a lot. I think, if I may say so, the adaptability has had a lot to do with us, those of us in the 20%, because it's not simply working to adapt to a situation that may or may not linger for a long time. It's adapting our mindsets. And I'm really glad to say that old dogs can learn new tricks, definitely. So the mindset change was the greatest challenge for me personally. Digital is unknown to us, although AFTEC had inklings of moving towards digital. It took COVID really to catapult us towards saying, okay, survival is not enough. How are we going to handle? Whereas we did 100% live theatre, what are we going to do? And lo and behold, the teams just sat down and they worked out DGF Tech. So we soft launched in December the Robin Hood slide we saw early on, excuse me, that had animation, computer graphics, and a lot of learning materials as well. I'm sure we're nowhere near as sophisticated as Sasha and her windmill pictures, but we will learn. Well, slowly we will get there. So I think adapting was really a habit of mind.
Interesting. And I think, you know, the elephant in the room, I suppose, isn't it? Always traditionally, when we talk about children's theatre or children's art projects, particularly very young children, the parents in the room are trying to get their kids off the screen. We always talk about screen culture or the digital being inferior to the real world experience or something. And Lynn, you talk about having now to learn new tricks, and you know, the younger people in the office, it's just second nature, and that younger generation being digital natives. I do wonder if this experience in COVID in our sector, you know, if you feel differently now about leaning into creating work digitally or not.
we have to lean into it. I don't think we can ever lean out of it. If you look at the internet, it was made public in 1993. So by 2023, it's 30 years. And every year, the content doubles. So it's a fact of life now. COVID or no COVID, you have to be able to deal with it. But how does one balance live events, live theatre, and the continuation, integration, hopefully seamlessness of the digital online platform? Because we work with so many schools, we are still trying to figure this out, how we would engage young audiences. Because the good thing about digital is you reach a wider audience, right? I can talk to the world, so to speak. But on the other hand, you're flooded with competition globally. When will pay sufficient attention to what we do? So this balancing act, I think I will be able to come to some kind of conclusion in about a year. We can talk about that later. It is not easy because it's a whole different ballgame. You don't simply take a lesson and put it online and call it digital learning. At least we don't believe that. So how does one interact with them? And we are trying to do that. Schools are using some of our programs. That would take experience and that would take time. I don't think it should be pure uploading of performances or even pure uploading of a quiz, for example. Everything has to be interactive. So I think what COVID has really given to AFTEC very positively, if not ironically, is further decentralization among teams, among ranks, I think, and a lot more inter-team discussion. So our young colleagues, I think, are seriously gaining a lot of ownership on what they do.
I'll just really quickly add to that. I think I totally agree with you. It is a really interesting balancing act. We certainly don't upload any of our performances to be to be watched online. The work that we do create on our digital platforms are very much artist-led projects that are conceived to to be watched, to be experienced on a digital platform, and at their core, they're very interactive. So they're not about kind of passive watching. They're extremely interactive, and most of them are either have an education focus and come directly from one of our live theatre or live performances. For example, Amphibian, which is a recent work that we just finished touring and closed in Adelaide on Saturday, which follows the journey of a young refugee boy making his way to Australia. There's a beautiful project attached to that called Of Land and Sea, and it essentially maps online an actual refugee journey, like a real life one. And through clicking on the different points of that journey, a whole lot of other information is given. So you hear interviews from an incredible refugee man who made the journey to Australia. You see photos of places that he travelled on his way. There are kind of questions, and so it is very interactive. It's not about kind of encouraging children to sort of passively watch. Thank you. I think Mel and I have just shared that with you, so you can have a look at that. It is a standalone experience, but obviously the whole idea of it is that a young person or a class would come and watch that live performance, and then this is a secondary kind of experience that goes along with that. So yeah, I just wanted to...
that's so exciting to hear from both of you in terms of very much, first of all, you're talking about that effect on audience and how the young people are engaging with the form, which just shows how nimble and considerate we are of our audiences, I think, as a sector. I'm interested to know, I think one of the strongest characteristics of our sector is that we do travel internationally a lot in normal times. When we did do that, the work translates very well internationally, and obviously that's a much harder proposition in COVID times. So I'm wondering from both of you, what you're now thinking about international collaboration. Lynn, I know you had, I think it was the Bravo project, and also your plays for young people, which are sort of based on, some international exchange or being in a different country or something. How are you imagining you can do these projects now?
Well, Bravo started in 2013. We've had 4 cohorts now, but the last cohort, due to COVID, I'm afraid we couldn't take anybody overseas, so we had to fly artists in to do that, and bless them. At that time, it was only 14 days quarantine, not 21. It's very important to go overseas for our young people, and I must add that we give priority to vulnerable, underprivileged young people coming into the Bravo program, which is serious acting training over 1.5 years in either physical theatre or classic theatre. So one done in Chinese and one done in English. And because we're about change, you actually see a lot of these young people being blown out of their minds with a different culture. And suddenly, when you're in front of a piece of modern art, for example, somebody who's from a privileged background and somebody from a vulnerable background, both of them can be standing there staring at that painting and trying to figure out what it means. So arts is really a social equalizer. That's why I think it's so important for young people to go out. Unfortunately, we have had to halt the Bravo program for obvious reasons. We don't tour because, as I said, our theatre productions are means to ends, that they're all about education and learning. With the plays for young people, Melanie, if I may have that slide, please. We started the Plays for Young People series 6 years ago at least. The idea came because we thought a lot of young people in schools would want to write their own plays. And a lot of teachers would come and ask us, what else do you have? And we thought, yes, indeed, we need to expand our cultural horizons, I think. Hong Kong is my home. Hong Kong is a very small city. And I do think that we have to look beyond our geographical area, which is just over 1,000 square kilometers for 7.3 million of us. So in 2015, I can't remember exactly, we started Plays for Young People, in which we would fly in playwrights from all over. That would be from Europe, from the United Kingdom, from Asia as well. And they would specifically write for young people or have had plays produced for young people. We bring in emerging translators because things need to be translated, first of all, from the native language into English and then from English into Chinese. And then they're disseminated to schools and youth centers and colleges through the Young Theatre Makers program. So this is the 3rd one, which is coming up at the end of October. Unfortunately, again, it has to be online. And this is how we tour or we connect internationally. We will have Khairi Anwar from Kuala Lumpur. We have 2 playwrights from, one Western Nigerian playwright, Chino, The Sweetness of a Sting. She's now in London. We also have Olga Macrini, who's from Moldova, actually, and we have 1 playwright from Taichung as well. Then we have veteran translators who would mentor them. So I think more and more now, we would like to expand the Plays for Young People. We're currently talking with a few Asian centers and universities to see how we can actually do this online, whether it be for translators of plays, for playwrights, or for people interested in script writing. Thank you, Melanie. Again, the internet and digitalization is giving us so much opportunity, but again, I think a word of caution to myself, we cannot overexpand. We cannot be everywhere and be everything for everybody. So the last 18 months, we've been researching. My colleagues have been learning online. We've had many courses that they attended. So we're reviewing, recalibrating, reimagining, and we will be relaunching next year.
Sasha, I wonder about your thoughts about international collaboration or international experience as well, being a company that tours so much traditionally internationally. Is Windmill Pictures the answer in terms of reaching people? But I'm wondering your thoughts around what do you do to compensate for that incredible experience when your artists can go and perform the work and see how it is received internationally as well?
Look, obviously, as all of us, we kind of are waiting to see how and when our borders open, and and we can start taking our work across the world again, and for those collaborations to be able to happen in a face-to-face sense. But I guess until then, as I said, that there has been a real shift in terms of the national touring that we can do during this period. Obviously that has been impacted by COVID, and but there have been considerable tours for us that have been able to proceed. We also have had some, I guess, international success with our digital works. Honey, I'm Home has been presented at several Canadian digital film festivals, and Sunrunners was presented at the Lincoln Centre. So I guess that's a bit of a new world for us to explore, how those projects, as they are kind of, as I described earlier, kind of standalone creative works, can reach audiences, and we can start to collaborate with festivals or presenters who are presenting that type of work. And as you say, the growth of Windmill Pictures, and as that continues, those projects continue to develop. Obviously, I don't, at the moment it may be an alternative to international touring, but obviously, it's all a bit of an unknown, as we know. But the hope is that in the next 12 to 24 months, then we can start to look towards, some of our borders reopening, and resuming some of that work. But I guess, our core focus is still on the developing of new theatre productions, and so we are able to still do that. And I guess hopefully those, it's just such an interesting waiting game as well. Like, there doesn't seem to be, there is no finite timelines, and there's no kind of really clear, there's no really clear roadmap forward, and it is so different for every country, and even as we find ourselves in Australia, it's so different for us from state to state at the moment. So I think you did touch on this earlier. One of, I think, the strengths of our sector is our resilience and our ability to pivot and be nimble, and shift our creativity into other areas, or slightly bend what we're already doing, to be adaptable, and to try and keep our artists working, try and keep engaging with our audiences as much as possible.
I wonder if I can ask Sasha a question. How have you dealt with monetization of what you have digitally? Monetization.
Look, that's a good question. To be honest, when lockdown happened, we offered all of our digital programs that I've spoken about earlier, so Sunrunners and Honey, I'm Home, free to all students in South Australia. We also offered it free to all of the venues that we had engaged with, where we couldn't necessarily tour to. And it was, I guess, just a way for us to keep engaging with our audiences and our partners, our networks and our industry, and make sure that artists could still continue, to share work with each other. So we did that for free. I'm not sure how that will continue. I think it's a really interesting question.
I think it literally is the $25,000 question, isn't it? In terms of, I think everyone now is faced with this issue of the monetization of the content. Lynn, we had a lot of, when we first went into the COVID, there was a lot of government funding for people to pivot, to create digital programs which enabled them to offer them for free. But I mean, a lot of the discussions we have at the Opera House now are about, well, is that going to be something that is paid for on demand? Or is it something we deliver live digitally, which, you know, is a different investment in terms of employing artists on the day to do something live or not? I think now everyone's starting to sort of try and knit that all together, aren't they, really, in terms of what the best offer can be.
And obviously, as I described earlier, the majority of our education resources are created to sit alongside or to deepen the experience of one of our live theatre performances.
Yes, it's the same with us, actually.
Yeah, so generally a ticket has been purchased, and that is part of, you know, the gift we give our audiences, along with, you know, teachers' resources and teachers' PDs and lesson plans, and that's certainly, so a lot of our education resources are free anyway, for schools that are booking our work. But I think it is a really interesting question into the future if we are pivoting and creating more online content. You know,
I don't know if you own your own theatre or you're resident in your own theatre, because none of us in Hong Kong do. I mean, we all are in government theatres, and therefore our funding subsidies and subvention from government would vary from a lot to, you know, a small sum. So I think last year all our income went south, I suppose, for everybody globally across the art sector. And while box office income really doesn't take up a huge percentage, nevertheless, it is still important, because as you said, Sasha, one ticket bought to a show entitles them to free education programs. But then we have to build our digital content as well. So how does one balance not only ticket income? And with COVID, although the economy is picking up, thank goodness, I mean, sponsors are being even more careful as to how they untie their purse strings. So, you know, wearing my management hat now instead of the learning hat.
Yeah, I guess Windmill are in a lucky position in that sense. We are kind of funded, obviously, to, you know, we get considerable funding from the education department to support the education sort of resources that we create. And we also do a lot of engagement with teachers, creating lesson plans and teachers' PDs, and connected to the particular works or curriculum kind of areas. And because our tickets are so cheap, really, you know, our box office income is never going to pay for everything we do. That's just not the model that we work within. And you know, we have a real commitment to supporting disadvantaged young people to access our work as well. 15% of all tickets are given for free to disadvantaged schools within South Australia or nationally when we tour. You know, if we're presenting this season, obviously it depends what the relationship with the venues are, but certainly with our national touring, 15% are free tickets. So our model is a little bit different in terms of, you know, how box office income kind of subsidises what we do, and it is also a bit different project to project, but certainly our work that is created for schools touring and our education resources are, that's sort of structured a little bit differently.
We've got about another 5 minutes probably left to have a bit more of the conversation. So I do encourage you all out there in Zoom land, if you do have some questions for either Lynn or Sasha, to start popping them in the Q&A function. So both of you, I have one sort of big thinking question for you, which is, what do you think now our children and the young audiences really need from us now? You know, what is the urgent task now? What's the urgent role that we play? How can we best support young people? Is it young leadership? Is it a new world order? Is it the empathy that we build? What is it? What is the urgent task for us as practitioners, for our audiences?
I can be quick. I'll try and be quick. I know we're running out of time. Look, for me, it's finding ways for us still to connect. You know, obviously that what we do best is create live theatre experiences. If we're unable to do that in a live setting, then, you know, what are the new ways that we can actually connect on a human level? What are the stories that are relevant to our young people of this time? How do we elevate their voices within that, within the creation of the work? So many of the works we create at Windmill, while they might not have people necessarily performing in them, although some of them did, we do Creation, which was a work we presented earlier in this year. It had 2 young people perform in it, but what was really amazing about that work was it really was based on answering burning questions that people had, and predominantly young people had, about how we got here, you know, how a baby is made, what happens after we die, and then a beautiful, and thank you, I think that the link to Creation just got popped up, so please have a look when you've got some time, but how we how the work that we make encourages conversation, encourages empathy for a more connected and positive world, I guess.
Well, in Hong Kong, the pace of life is quite chaotic, as you can imagine. And I really am envious of your more leisurely pace of life, shall I put it that way? And I think because we're such a fast-paced society, when COVID hit us and everything stopped, a lot of people, from young people to adults, just felt lost, because you're staring at your 4 walls, and we have very small 4 walls, you must know that. And therefore meaningfulness, I think, is the most important value. Empathy, of course, that's what we do with the medical undergraduates, but meaningfulness, we've been talking to a lot of young people. The way they found it, funnily enough, in the last 18 months is they've been giving back to us. So they've been joining us on stage, as you saw, as facilitators to our Young Theatre Makers program. They will be part of our DGF Tech as voiceovers or as facilitators as well. So I think there is a vacuum that needs to be filled, which is one reason why the arts and well-being have suddenly surfaced globally. We're not into the focus of arts and well-being, but I can see the arts are about expressing your emotions. And I think given the Asianness of who we are, we seldom deal with the affective side of ourselves, not in families, not in schools as well. So if there was one single word, it is really resilience through meaningfulness. They have to find a purpose in their lives, be you 16 years old or 26 years old. And I do hope that on our digital platform, we would be able to engage them. Because the arts are so good at reminding us that we have a common shared humanity, irrespective of whatever else, diversity that we discuss.
Absolutely. We have a really good question from Gemma in the Q&A. Hi, Gemma. And it's continuing on this discussion, which I think is really timely at the moment around the digital experiences. Gemma asks, the monetization of the digital experience is a real challenge, as we've said. Have we seen any ways that we can work more effectively in partnership across the sector to find and or test solutions? I'm happy to kick that off in terms of from a presenter's point of view, Gemma. I think there's something, as you know, about there's, a few key players out there who are starting to really explore these digital experiences, and definitely there's a great value of practitioners getting together to say, hey, this is the state of play and this is how much we think we're going to charge for it. And that consistency probably gives a good visibility, I suppose, to what this thing is out there. Just a really boring back-end thing for the producers out there too is, depending on whether we're talking about streaming a live performance digitally or working with the artists on an additional digital resource that hadn't been thought of when a project was contracted or something. There's a whole piece of work there in the background with the union and this, that and the other, and usage and, you know, all that sort of stuff in the digital space that it feels like we need to get a little bit more finessed around as will happen. It feels like we're on the Wild West frontier a little bit to starting with all of this, doesn't it? Sasha, Lynn, do you have any further thoughts you'd like to add around this digitization of digital experiences?
I guess for
monetization, sorry.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think we're kind of at the beginning of the conversation, and you know, I think as a sector there's lots of conversations to have, but it's such a complicated one in terms of, you know, when artists are kind of presenting their own work as an independent artist, or if it's happening in the context of a company or a producing company, or you know, and if and rights, and you know, how long something can be kind of played for or how many times. I think it's really complex, and yeah, obviously we don't live stream any of our work. It's not sort of something we do, but yeah, I think we're, as you say, we're kind of at the beginnings of probably lots of much bigger conversations. Yeah.
You know, maybe one day we need a pool of content globally. It will be a digital arts bank in which we all bank in our stuff and then get global sponsors to fund everything, and then we reap some of the monetary gains. I mean, maybe it's not to be that size.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Lynn, though, because I just think Gemma was actually raising the possibility of partnerships too. And, you know, one of the go-to sort of areas you feel is about tech partnerships, or, you know, software company partnerships, or, you know, partners that can enable the form of the work to be cost effectively delivered or something, I suppose.
Or when technology gets a lot more inexpensive and it becomes everybody's household item, then I think we don't have to look at such high costs at the capital development end.
And I think too, there's, you know, again, standing on the Wild West frontier here, it's the audience change, it's the behavior change and the expectation change, isn't it? You know, we think a lot about, from a venue perspective, about how we can invite people to come to the experience on site and what makes it easy to do that. And there's that same sort of level of communication needed with audience about saying, well, no, watch this from home, or watch this from home and do this bit at home, or, you know, it's a culture of behavior that we're looking at changing as well, but saying that kids are very relaxed with that.
Yes, I think it's a double-edged sword as well. When everything is free online and young people are so used to getting everything at the tip of the fingertips, literally. I mean, what is going to attract them to want to part with $1 or $2? This is the first thing. The second thing, I keep on saying to everybody that even if it's $20, we've got to put a value to the ticket, because otherwise people will think that the arts are always for free, that artists don't need to pay their rent or feed mother. And therefore we really have to think very carefully about our own livelihood, seriously, vis-a-vis all these questions.
Gemma's added an interesting point here too. She says, when connecting with audience through digital experiences, how do you navigate the relationships between the parents there in the background in the room, or maybe using the technology, the experience, and the kids? Like, how do you sort of think about those two separate audience relationships? Do we just do a lot of people make digital work and parents buy it for babysitting, or?
That's really interesting. I mean, most of our digital work, the majority of our digital work has been made with an educational kind of context. So it's usually done in a classroom, or you know, in an online kind of learning capacity. So that's an interesting one. Although obviously once you sort of move into the film and television world, then that's obviously quite a different thing. But I think again, you know, we would hope that those experiences would be a shared experience with a family, and not separate. I guess the exception to that is probably the Sunrunners project, which I spoke about, which is very much about, you know, creative play, you know, pretty much self-led by children. But, you know, yeah, I think I'd probably have to think about that one a little bit further, to be totally honest.
That's a good question, Gemma. Thank you. It's been complex, Gemma, because we know that parents are sitting behind, listening to the classes that we're offering online. And the kids are not as relaxed as when they are in school and in a classroom doing digital work. I think we need to explain very clearly to parents, at least in Hong Kong, and I can only speak from a Hong Kong context, that if your child is online, it doesn't mean he or she is necessarily up to something no good. And that online programming can be very stimulating, inspiring, and educational. But how do we help parents to rate what is being done, what is on offer? I have seen that over the last 18 months, we have had to do a huge amount of communication. My colleagues, I mean, bless them again, they're on the phone always, speaking with teachers, speaking to parents, because this is such a brave new world that they have to be extremely careful of what young people are engaging with. So I think that's a whole area we need to work on as well, communicating to parents what we do, why we do, how it connects to what we do, and how it benefits their children. Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Louise asks, do we actually have any thoughts about how digital content can be used to inspire imaginative engagement, considering that there are a lot of children spending a lot of time online and at screens at the moment? So I think, Sasha, my understanding of Sunrunners probably perfectly personifies that, doesn't it, about an imaginative engagement?
Yeah, and it also, I'm not sure if I've sent you the link to this, Melanie. If I have, there's the whole sort of education resource that runs alongside Creation. One of the projects I spoke about earlier was literally a whole range of in-school workshops where young people created their own their own films, really short films, through engagement with artists, and then presented it online to share. That they're on our website. I guess they're our main ones. The rest, you know, Honey, I'm Home is more about the way that we engaged our artists through lockdown, and gave them a way to sort of keep creating in their own homes. I'm not sure that answers.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a trend of that work, obviously. Gemma's work with audio play,
that's right.
Thresholds at home experiences as well, and trying to extrapolate the form a little bit. Ingrid's got a fantastic question, which is, we always talk about young leadership. What's both of your perspectives on this? What do you think, you know, we can learn from these young audiences? What does this mean, this thing about young leadership now at this moment?
I think not only from an audience perspective, but in terms of the work we're creating and how young people feed into those creation processes is really important for us. A lot of our works start with interviews or start with workshops within schools, directly asking quite pointed questions to young people or asking their perspectives on certain issues. Certainly that was the starting point for Amphibian, you know, which, as I said earlier, is a refugee story. But at the time where we started creating that work, we had no idea that that's what it would be. We were really interested in the question around what young people hopes and dreams were for the future, what their fears were, were they afraid of losing, you know, and they spoke really clearly about fear of losing their homes, fear of losing their family, and what that meant. And that really was a starting point for the creation of that work. Same with creation, which I mentioned earlier. I think young people and the questions they want answered, and us being able to put that at the center of work, and then getting really incredible artists to reimagine that in unexpected ways, makes for really relevant work and really interesting conversations around how audiences see themselves reflected, around how young people see their voices kind of elevated in really different ways.
And Lynn, you obviously believe in young leadership and the potential of young people with the work that you do.
Yes, definitely COVID has shown us that even more so, no one single person has all the answers. So it's a lot of, if you imagine us as a beehive, we're really a very busy beehive here at AFTEC, talking to people across a range of generations within my office. And listening skills definitely have improved by leaps and bounds. Because while the young people are digital natives and have a lot of online experiences, they do not as yet have the experience of putting something together. This also goes for young artists, by the way. There are artists in Hong Kong who are keen on education, but my feeling, and I'm sorry to say that there's been no research done in Hong Kong on this, arts education, arts in education is still a rather low priority, let me put that way. I would like to see it come up more. And as a result, we've started training programs for young artists as well, working with teachers in schools, so that the teachers, while they understand the arts and the values and the powers of it, the young artists will understand the educative aspect of things. So it is a slow start, but we are working actually on a 3-year program now. Well, it's been a few years working on this. So I think the young leadership is not simply about our audience. It's not simply about our colleagues in the office. It's also about how conservatoires and faculties of arts, education, actually put forward creative teaching and thinking as a possibility to systematize how we advocate the arts in the years to come. If we, as the arts sector all over the world, we need to connect with the larger non-art sectors. I think in order for us to make our work even more meaningful.
We started this conversation, Lynn, you were talking about justifying the work that we do in some ways in terms of needing an impact measure around it. And I think it's interesting to think if we need to speak the language of other sectors, you know, we do know that creativity is now recognized as one of the important skill sets that anyone, let alone young people, need to have to thrive in the world ahead, in the increasingly complex world ahead. So it's a good fight we fight every day, isn't it?
Yes, and we have to do it together.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, so everyone, this is the end of our time together. Thank you all, those of you for dinner time here in Australia and late afternoon in Hong Kong there, for joining us today. I feel like we only touched the tip of the iceberg there with the digital engagement discussion. Feels like there's a big appetite to convene and thrash that one out a hell of a lot more. But I'd like to thank Sasha for her time and Lynn for her time today. I'd like to thank our hosts APAM and 𝐂𝐸𝐴𝐴 as well. And hopefully we'll see you all again at another Eventide talk soon.
Thank you so much, Tamara.
Thanks so much, everyone. Good night.